Hey, Culminators. This is one of our few but well justified repeat appearances. And in a way it is, in a way it isn't, because when we had the last time we had a Dan Hull on, and we weren't doing video yet, and to know Dan is to listen to him, but to listen to him and look at him at the same time is a different experience altogether. And Dan Hull, of course, the outstanding lawyer with a gazillion experiences, and he's having some pretty wild ones now. A person who has had a very profound political curve over his life. Dan, how you doing? Thanks for coming on.
I'm good. Thanks for asking me, and thanks for all the advance notice. I appreciate it.
Sometimes there are people who are harder to get on than you, and sometimes they can't make it. So
I like being second choice too.
But let the record reflect. You and I talked on Monday about just this, and we talked about Friday possibly being the day. So this is the day. Great to have you on. You've got some interesting stuff to tell us about some of your recent work, and I think it's going to end up being pretty topical. So jump into it. But first, take a drag because your voice can't get any.
Thanks again for coming. And the truth is, when I called you the other day, you said, "Dan, God damn it, can't you see I'm busy?" So, yeah, I think the reason that it's December 17th and January 6th was when it was January 6th, and it has occurred to me, even while this is a sort of a joint project for all Americans, prosecution, defendants, everybody. This is not something that we want to happen again the way it happened, or even anywhere close to what happened. But I'm a little concerned that the politics of this, to a certain extent, may be, especially the cultural aspect of it, may be overwhelming the facts.
Well, let's take a step back. What is your involvement? You say that everyone's in on this, and you could have mentioned Congress too. What's your involvement?
I represent one of the the leaders of the Proud Boys, and he's not an alleged leader. He actually was a leader, but he was doing on January 6th with some other Proud Boys what Proud Boys usually do, and that is march to the Capitol, have your picture taken, march down back the hill, and take a nap, and maybe get ready to drink some beers. I have a client in the congressional investigation.
Okay.
That's Henry Theriault.
Okay.
A good friend of Biggs, and who was, of course, not here on January 6th.
Joe Biggs is the first client you just referred to.
Joe Biggs is a Florida resident and Purple Heart winner, former Army sergeant with tours of duty in both Iraq and Afghanistan, who is 37 years old. And Henry Theriault is the same age, and also a resident of Florida, Miami. And he is serving out the last 3 weeks right now of his incarceration for allegedly burning a flag, burning a Black Lives Matter flag or banner here in Washington, D.C. on December 12th of last year.
Now, was the gravamen of that offense the fact that it was not his to burn? I mean, pretextually, notwithstanding, but you can't prosecute someone for flag burning. That's been well established, right? I mean,
what he did, there were two offenses. One was having a magazine and it was empty for a firearm that he was caught with, I guess, at the airport. And then secondly, the burning of the flag was what he did was cop to, if you will. To be honest with you, I don't think he did it. I don't think anybody thinks he did it, but he copped to the burning of the flag, sort of from, I don't have a big problem with that. I'm burning the flag. He does not have a problem with Black Lives Matter movement in general, generically, like a lot of us would, but I think it's fair to say that Theriault has a huge problems with the organization as it's existed since 2013, and what it's done and what it really is. And that can be the subject of another show, but Terrio and Biggs both have also been sued in 4 civil lawsuits, 3 or 4 civil lawsuits. I have trouble keeping track. And one of the things that's really obvious to me as time goes on is that even while there have been very aggressive and I think good faith in most cases efforts to do discovery, do the work by the FBI and by DOJ, that the gravamen of a lot of what's going on, both in terms of the civil cases and the criminal cases, is that there was this conspiracy, or if you will, series of conspiracies. I think it's pretty obvious to everyone, including the Department of Justice and Reuters and New York Times, that there was no conspiracy or plan to do anything. There was a group of people who are not associated with any of the groups like Proud Boys or Oath Keepers who were near the Capitol, around the Capitol, when it was breached, but it was breached by people who were very upset about something. I think you could probably refer to them as Trump normies, but this was not a coordinated effort to do anything, insofar as we know, by way of stopping the certification of the Harris Biden vote. There's just nothing there. And I do give the Justice Department, there are 700 people who have been charged with criminal offenses. I do give them a lot of leeway to investigate this and some time, and they're still arresting people and charging people for the first time even this week. But comes a certain point where you have to say to yourself that while people might have had different agendas at the last minute about what they could do going up Capitol Hill, there was no plan, there was no conspiracy, and at best there was sort of a let's throw things up against the wall, maybe on the part of the White House, and see what happened. And by that I'm talking about Trump's speech. But I have a client, Joe Biggs, who's been incarcerated since April 22nd for future dangerousness. And future dangerousness presupposes that you will do something like this again. So in essence, they're saying that Joe Biggs and his 3 co-defendants, who have been talked about as leaders of the Proud Boys that day, are dangerous because they may do something or commandeer something like this again, which is ridiculous, which is insane, and everybody knows it's insane. But there was enough there from the kinds of things they were saying in the very beginning, and certain arguments made by the Justice Department to convince a very good judge who's overlooking the criminal part of this, in my case, Biggs, to keep these guys in jail. And that was reaffirmed. There's been 2 motions to
dismiss.
Jail. And that was
okay, yeah.
On Tuesday. Sorry, I didn't mean to be talk too much or.
I want you to talk, Stein. You're the guy with the stuff that people want to hear today.
Well, feel free to drive me in one direction or another, as you're good at. But there was no conspiracy to do anything that day. I've seen as many I've seen the tapes that everyone else can see. Let's put it that way, including some that not everyone else can see, but just based on the ones that the public can see, that most people can see. They may have come up from the New York Times, or may come from some people who were along with the Proud Boys. It's really a long walk to say there was a conspiracy to do anything. Now, I get why you'd want to plead conspiracy. I think I probably would too. But if I were the Justice Department, I think I would have dropped it by now. There was no conspiracy. And the problem with the conspiracy charge is it's a link to this obstruction, this sort of new form of obstruction of an official proceeding with Congress, which a couple of judges already have now said is fair game, a new application, a novel application of the obstruction statutes called, it's 5112C, but it is a new thing, and it's getting lots of leeway because this was January 6th, and everything about January 6th is different. People don't want it to happen again. I mean, even people who are involved in, who made the mistake of going past the barriers that day, who made the mistake of going onto the Capitol grounds that day, think that maybe they made a mistake doing that. Certainly they trespassed. There was no First Amendment right to do anything once you go past those barriers, which were extended both on the East Lawn and the West Lawn. But it wasn't First Amendment, but it wasn't First Amendment speech and activity, but it was at the most trespass. In some cases, not in the case of any of my clients or anybody that I know is a legitimate Proud Boy. In the case of some people, there was violence. There was, banging on cops, banging on other people, going in and out of the Capitol, breaking things. My guys weren't involved with that kind of thing, but they did trespass. My guys being just bigs, and that's trespass, and that's fine. But it hardly rises to the level of conspiracy or obstruction of a proceeding, especially under the circumstances, which are completely a public record at this point, of the Proud Boys. Proud Boys, what they do is this is their fourth march since July 4th of when they were in Washington on January 6th, excuse me. And when they go in, what they do is anywhere they go, they march around. These guys are hams. They're a social club. As you know, they were started by a comedian. They're a little bit theatrical, a little bit loose with rhetorical devices, but there's nothing racist about them, nothing white nationalist.
Or far right. I mean, the narrative has been absolutely just picked up by the media. Far right, extremist, racist. There is no support for any of that.
There's no support for any of that, except to the extent that groups like this, like people aren't always sure of. It's like being on Twitter. People think, if you have a right-wing view on Twitter, they go, oh, Dan Hall, I'm a racist, and Dan Hall must be a racist too. And they don't get it. They're in the group and then they get mad at you and they find out you're not a white nationalist or a racist. The Proud Boys are very much a cultural group.
Dan Hall, just let's take a breath here. For those who did not listen to our first podcast, and shame on them, we've only republished it about 15 times each since we did it. You're a lifelong Republican, right?
Yeah, I grew up with Republicans and I studied them for many years, but and I worked on Capitol Hill for Republican, but I've spent most of my life as a kind of moderate, pragmatic Democrat. And I did not vote for Trump the first time. I voted for Trump the second time. There's nothing terribly ideological about me, as you and I have discussed before. Mm-hmm. And there shouldn't be anything that ideological about what happened on January 6th, but it's been tortured into, the forces of evil and the forces of good. And get back to what you were saying, there's nothing far right about the Proud Boys. The response to that is, oh, that's Stan Hall and other people kind of, hiding behind these things that they say they really are. They're not. They're a social club. They're started by a comedian. They started out as a cultural response to a lot of things were happening in the United States. They're all men group. You can't be a woman to be in the group, but they have you just have to be anatomically correct from the standpoint of what that has meant traditionally to be in the group. So you can be, Jewish, Black, gay, Muslim, you can be anything. But it is a social club. It's a new social club. And like most clubs or most organizations, it attracts a lot of different kinds of people, some of whom don't get it. But the rank and file of the leadership and the people who have been important in the chapters will tell you, that was not the way to do January 6th. People should not have gone up the hill. If I went up the hill, I screwed up. And even Enrique Terrio said that he would never have, if he had been there, he would have been, I think he would probably tell you, not to put words in his mouth, but I think he'd probably tell you he would have stopped that in a second. And I think he's told Newsweek and CNN, he didn't think there was a stolen election. And he thought that
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, he didn't think, he said, like, I think a lot of people thought it was a little odd that a guy that, never seemed to campaign,
and who didn't win a single primary till everyone else quit.
and then no, there's some odd. I thought it was a little odd, just like Democrats and certain people in the Clinton Biden camp thought that November 2016 was a little odd, but I don't think, even that said, I don't know anyone that I'm associated with on a day-to-day basis in this case, and I'm sort of living and breathing this event, these cases, whatever you want to call them, that thinks that there was a steal. I think there were some odd things, and I think they were angry with the result and said some things that they probably shouldn't have said. But I don't think they think there was a steal, and I do think that I don't have anybody's arguing with me, but at this point, but I don't know anyone. Every once in a while, somebody will come to me and say, "Hey, I'm a friend of Joe Biggs, or I'm a friend of Enrique Terrio. I was just, exercising my First Amendment rights that day," and I said, "Stop it right now! You weren't." Once you went past those barriers, there's no First Amendment rights. You can go right up to the Capitol and yell at it. You can do certain things, but if you knew or should have known where it says, "Don't come here," and the Capitol, which I know pretty well, Capitol grounds is rarely staked off. It's rarely staked off on the east side or the west side, but that day, because of the events of the summer and security concerns about both the left and the right, Antifa, things being burned down by Antifa in Washington, fights that broke out between Antifa and other groups, there was some concern that on a constitutional day, if you will, January 6th, we're going to make the perimeter bigger than ever, and you can't come up here. So they basically stopped the perimeter of the property on both the foot of the hill and the back end of the hill, which is the west lawn, or east lawn rather. But it was pretty clear if you were there, and I've seen tapes of this. I was at the Ellipse, but I didn't go to the up to the Capitol because I had to work like some of us. And I remember that, from watching the tapes, what's really interesting, you can see that people are deciding whether to follow up these Trump normies up the hill. They went up the hill first. I didn't see anybody in tactical gear. There may have been, but there was a decision to do that, and it wasn't the best decision. And I think some people knew what that decision, meant. It meant at a minimum they were trespassing, and they screwed up. But beyond that,
and people have to understand, like they say things, but it's the people's house. It's the people's house. That's symbolic, okay? It belongs to the United States government, which you may or may, regardless of what you feel your relationship is with the United States government, you're not entitled to walk into the White House or the Capitol or the Dirksen office building or any federal building and just make yourself comfortable or hang out.
Yeah, like it's a museum or something. What's really interesting to me is with a couple of exceptions, and Biggs is one of them. I can't find anybody who'd ever been there before. I mean, there were actually people there, not a lot, who didn't know what it was. That some people thought it was a White House. It was as if it was just another museum on the mall, and it's not. And yes, it's the people's house, but the people's house, especially on a quote constitutional day, even for a ceremonial event, especially after the summer and fall of 2020, they can, they can cordon the place off. And it was very obvious. It wasn't like there was, if you look at the pictures of the perimeters, it was not a closed, tall fence or anything like that with a moat. It was just
that came later.
It was just kind of like, to a person of average intelligence said, don't come up here today. Don't come up here today. Don't come up to the Capitol today. There were cops around, not a whole lot of them, but a charge up that hill was certainly like planned for, but not necessarily anticipated, and it wasn't hard to get through those barriers. But I think it's really important to note that the people who did traverse those barriers and did it, they weren't running up the hill or charging or storming, but I've seen tapes that everybody can see of the Proud Boys sitting down and having lunch. Proud Boys go up the hill, they take their pictures, they do their hammy things. They had this woman who's been working on a documentary who was recently in the news, who's a fairly serious Democrat who likes a couple of the Proud Boys, or seems to think that they have been misinterpreted in a lot of ways. So she goes up and they take pictures and they do the thing that you see with Joe Biggs doing they say, Joe, do your war face. I really wish he hadn't done it, but he did it. It's like every third picture you see this is Joe Biggs about to storm the Capitol. That picture was taken on right in front of the Supreme Court before any of this stuff happened. And it was just kind of the goofy things that they do a lot of the time. Do the Proud Boys, not to digress here, but do the Proud Boys have some serious ideas? Sure, they have some serious ideas about doing good works. They have serious ideas about culture, what it should be in America, or at least what kinds of ideas can be discussed. Do they have ideas about Antifa? They don't like Antifa. That Antifa, what came after they became a group 5 years ago. But if you ask a Proud Boy whether or not they would engage Antifa at night, at a certain point, not during the day, at night, if the Antifa seemed to be threatening or actually hurting Trump normies, in other words, non-Proud Boys, non-groups, they'd say, yeah, we'll do that. We'll be their security force. And with very few exceptions, they have been defensive. They have been on, sort of very restrained. And one of the things that people don't get about this whole thing on January 6th was the reason the Proud Boys were marching around incognito and with if you will, out of colors, and also with walkie-talkies was not to make their obstruction of Congress or the conspiracy or the march up the hill, more effective. It was to avoid Antifa. On December 12th, 4 members of the Proud Boys had been stabbed by an Antifa. Only the Washington Post even mentioned it a little bit, and they sort of made it sound like it was Proud Boys' fault. These guys were in not in great numbers that day. They stayed very close together. They were out of uniform in terms of the kinds of Fred Perry shirts and things they usually wear. You could tell who they were every once in a while because they would, if you were near them, they'd say, yeah, we're Proud Boys. But the idea was to stay close together. The group moving up along the Capitol of Proud Boys, they were out early. They didn't listen to Trump's speech. They did what they always do, which is go to the front of the Capitol, which is the real front of the Capitol for some people, is the east side by the Supreme Court.
This is that picture, right? That you're talking about?
Yes, that's it. That's the picture. And that picture is out. Look at that, everybody. That is not too far from, East Capitol Street. So this is exactly the picture you're talking about. But this was part of the fun and games before they went back down the hill to the right and went over by the Department of Labor. And there's lots of films.
Sure.
This is not a theory. And
no, and I've taken this view of the Capitol while standing on the Supreme Court steps myself.
So and I've seen you on the Supreme Court. Celebrating a great First Amendment victory. So you know that area. But then they go back down in the picture would be to the right in front of the Russell Building, where I had my first job ever with the desk. Go down by the Russell Building, down past the Taft statue, and you're on Constitution Avenue. You could be walking a little bit on the grounds of the Capitol, but for the most part, you're just walking back down. So they walk back down. They're eating lunch from 30 to 45 minutes. Everybody agrees it's at least 30 minutes. And somebody comes up to Joe and Amanda, another one of the leaders, and say, what are we going to do now? Says, well, we're going to go back to the ellipse. We're going to go back to the ellipse. And right around the time that's being said, you can also see this in film. So these steadily marching armies of mom and pop Americans, God bless them, walking up. They've just heard it's about 1 o'clock, a little bit before 1. Trump has stopped, and they're marching up the hill. The Proud Boys are still sitting down. They're looking around, and somebody obviously says, "What are they doing?" So rather than go to the ellipse at the last minute, there's this magic moment which say, "Let's go over there to the edge. Let's go over there to Peace Circle, the roundabout." And they stopped, and they tried to gather everybody. By that point, a few people that we now know were not Proud Boys who were in the group. There were people who were not Proud Boys who worked for other organizations, including the government, who were in that group. But no, this was not no, listeners, America, this was not a Antifa operation. This was not an FBI operation. This was the madness of crowds when people went up that hill.
I mean, Dan, that's the sound. That's the sound bite. That's that's the thing that you're saying is being who you are, which is a person who calls him like he sees him every time. It's an exaggeration, notwithstanding the FBI's obvious involvement, to say the FBI created or directed the events, or all of them, on January 6th. It's also incredibly naive to think they had nothing to do with it.
And I'm sorry I'm smoking, but I'm just finishing breakfast.
Oh, you can have your scotch too. That's okay. This is an adult channel. Not an adult channel. It's a channel for grown-ups.
You got to stay on track here.
No, you don't.
The thing people have said to me, I keep hearing the right has gone as crazy as the left on the conspiracy theories of what's happened. Do not think that I think that it's been over politicized just on the left. It's the right too. People are saying that Antifa was there. Of course they were there. They were around. There were some people around. People were saying the FBI was there undercover, people acting like, the usual FBI undercover hunting outfit in the middle of the mall. I've seen this a few times. It's pretty good. It's another program. But there were likely other undercover cops. There were lots of people around doing things, and maybe they even had agendas. Maybe they wanted, but they didn't need to do anything. The crowds did that for them, then went up the hill. And unfortunately, one of my clients and a few of his brethren, followed them up the hill. But I think it's really interesting that there is, if there is a cause and effect here, I don't think you can call it a conspiracy. I didn't hear the Trump speech or remember the beginning of it, but there was something about that moment or something that he may have said that did send some people up the hill, but it didn't send people who were, you can't get your average military, ex-military or former policeman to, in a situation like that. People are used to being shot at, used to being in emergency situations, to get that excited. And a lot of the Proud Boys were, of that ilk. And if you look at pictures that everybody can see in movies of, for instance, Joe Biggs and one of his comrades, if you will, Joe Biggs is looking, people are going nuts. They're watching up near the edge. There's some fighting. It was terrible. There were deaths. That's terrible. There were some very violent things going on, but Biggs and at least one of his lieutenants or co-lieutenants is looking at his watch like they're playing Words with Friends. Working at their it's not like something that they're all they're very calm. They don't hit anybody. They walk, don't run. they're not in the Capitol for very long. They're not around any fighting. They don't see any fighting. There was fighting in different, there's 3 or 4 parts of the Capitol where different things happened. It's a relatively big building, but a small space of ground in terms of square area. But this is not. Again, you've got guys who are in stab-proof gear, which I thought was interesting. Scab-proof gear costs a little bit more, and most people don't have it, than bulletproof gear. So you have people in stab-proof gear in the, not in colors, walking up the hill, trying to avoid Antifa. Although they do say, where's Antifa at some point, that kind of like braggadocio threat. But that's all, they're all safe up on the hill, and they're like in that picture you just showed me in front of the Supreme Court. Well, and I think one of the reasons we're doing this now is that we've just got a decision, sort of a double whammy on at least my client Joe Biggs and his 3 co-defendants who are of great interest to the government. They're going to be detained based on future dangerousness. And in addition to that, this particular judge, all the judges on the district court, federal district court, are all very good, all different politically. This particular judge, who happens to be a Trump appointee and is a very good judge, has decided that he will also uphold the obstruction count, the novel one, that's being used against a lot of the players who are defendants in this case. And there's some daylight here. We still have an opportunity to get Biggs and other defendants out of jail so they can prepare for trial. I think this is going to try. I think that the government may be making a mistake in trying to try it. They're, high-fiving each other a little bit now because 2 or 3 times they've done better before the courts than they thought they would. And that's particularly true in our proceeding. But you've got guys in jail with no criminal record. They're in 4 different states who need to prepare for trial, who have an opportunity, maybe one more shot, we'll give it. We may have to go to the district circuit court to do it. We may be able to do it through Judge Kelly, who
DC Circuit,
a fair guy. We need to get these guys in a situation where they can actually prepare for trial. That's not going to be in any American jail. So the notion would be, people go back home, they have a temporary release that is somewhat protracted up until the time of trial. Trial at this point is for May 18th. And that's where it looks like we're going. But I do think that people need to understand this is a joint project. This is not, when I go before these judges in this thing, particularly in this one case, I don't feel like it's us against them. We all need to figure out how to do this so it won't happen again. We have to figure out whether it's fair to use obstruction statutes to apply to basically ceremonial or ministerial things like a certification of an electoral college vote. And we want to make sure that when people, protest and have beefs, things are done the right way. I would imagine that there would be a new set of laws that will be written at some point that can't be, of course, applied retroactively to what happened. But we need some rules, and we also at some point, despite all the everybody's got a civil suit now. That's the other thing that's happening. There's been
that's
we'll talk about that
concerning.
in just a second, and because that's just really that's frankly just annoying. Somebody has to ask the question at some point after we figure out whether this was a good thing to do or people did it the right way. Get the politics out of it a little bit. Say, why did this happen? Why? How did this possibly happen? No, it's not because Trump exhorted everyone to do this. How did it happen that we had such a divide in America that something like this could occur with a lot of people who on paper seem to be sane, have no criminal records. In fact, some cases have very admirable resumes. And just said, I'm not going to take it anymore, and I'm going to march up that hill. And that's what I want to know. That's what I want to know. And I think everything between.
And how was it managed? How was
Yeah.
that situation managed or mismanaged so profoundly by the people with responsibility for managing crowds on special days in a very special place? That's a gigantic issue. And no one wants, right now, the people who are in power do not want to touch that, obviously.
Yeah, and I think that the House committee, I would rather have been a commission, but it's a bipartisan commission. But the House committee can do what it's doing and do this inquiry, but it's highly political. Most people know that. A lot of things that any House committee does is political, but this is particularly political, and it's personal. And I would just like to know, culturally, how are we gonna, we've got to stop this war. We've got to stop this war, and the left has to stop coming up with conspiracy theories that really aren't true. And to a certain extent, many of the left know they're not true. And the same on the right. People on the right can be as bad. And I'm probably more frustrated talking to the people who are on the right, who have this certain narrative that they expect me to adopt because of what I'm doing and the kind of work I'm trying to do, my firm's trying to do in representing the reviled or whatever. These are for the most part, people who went up that hill or aunts, uncles, sons, daughters. Yes, they may have been, in a lot of cases, the particular ones that went up the hill from certain classes, certain regions, or certain kinds of occupational niches in America. I haven't really seen anything to bring them together that way. I do know that we've talked about this, out on the ellipse that day, this was not there were thousands of people. I don't know what the crowd, I'm not good at estimating crowds, but it was way more people than you would ever expect to see at an event like that. And they were all happy. They weren't mad. They were happy to be there. They're happy to be with each other. It's kind of the last party for Trump, I guess. But the people who went up the hill were a small subset of that. And Proud Boys and the Oath Keeper. The Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, that's another thing. People have to understand that these groups are different. Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys don't even like each other. They won't work with each other. They have just totally different, there's a difference between a really, I don't know, there's a difference between, Frank Burns and, John Belushi.
Okay, that's a pretty compelling distinction. I mean, Dan,
go ahead.
You've been involved in politics and living mostly in DC for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree that a non-political or even a less political, truthful reckoning cannot happen in the foreseeable future?
I'm afraid you're right. I'm an optimistic person, as you know. I just don't see it until all this kind of bad water runs under the bridge. And I actually thought that, to get back to what I was going to mention, I actually thought that we were going to get to the point where a lot of Americans are at the point where they think, these Proud Boys, if you look at what people who have taken the time to read about them or find out, these Proud Boys are really not that much different in the way they look at things than I am. And I understand the madness of crowds and herd mentality, and maybe this did happen. The way that the narrative, if you will, of people like Dan Hall has is no conspiracy, no plan. Some very good reasons to think that the Proud Boys, because of some of their rhetoric before the election, should be investigated. But that's done. They're not coming up with anything. They're not coming with anything in terms of conspiracy or obstruction. It's just not there, which I think that's makes it very difficult for the DOJ. But for right now, I'm sort of one of them will listen to this. I'd like them to be high-fiving for the next 3 months while I get ready. But there have been 4 civil lawsuits, and I'm probably going to get this wrong, 2 of which are under the auspices of the Lawyers Committee under Civil Rights, which I used to work for. Did some work for them one summer. If that wants to, if you want to confuse your listeners more about me, but it's a very good group. Historically, it's kind of the civil rights version of the ACLU. ACLU was great when they did speech, and I think that the Lawyers Committee under Civil Rights is great when they do just civil rights, not politics. So we've got Paul Weiss and another good firm in Philadelphia getting involved in that, filing civil lawsuits. So now with the District of Columbia lawsuit that was filed last week, you've got these, they're pushing this conspiracy narrative back into the public view. And that's unfortunate, and that's a PR thing, but I feel like we had done, both through the public consciousness, maybe talking about this a little bit in the right way without talking about details of the lawsuit or details of your client representation, that people were beginning to realize that this may not have been what the left would like you to think it was. And it's not what the right would like you to think about. This right-wing, Antifa, FBI thing caused this is as infuriating, but there was no conspiracy. There was no plan. Were there professional crowd prodders, people who knew how to excite crowds in and around the Capitol? Maybe, but I don't see them as becoming, part of the story here. So, it's kind of like you've got a situation where Enrique Tarrio is about to get out of jail and cooperate with the House committee, which he wants to very much to do. He's not going to hide. He's been a proactive participant in all but one of the lawsuits. I think he needs to make appearances in these lawsuits and tell his side of the story. I don't think he's going to speak for the Proud Boys. Proud Boys is a lot of different things and a lot of different groups at this point, but he's going to talk about what he was doing, what the Proud Boys were doing at the time. And, at a time where I thought that, if you will, narrative or some of the public consciousness about what really happened that day, we've got these, very morally superior lawsuits, like by the District of Columbia government. And of all things, they want the Proud Boys to pay for the overtime for DC cops. The Proud Boys is not a good source for that.
Yeah, I think we can both agree with that.
Well, Proud Boys is, Proud Boys in general is not like where I would go to. I don't think that's the deep pocket. I think Attorney General Rancine said, bankrupting the Proud Boys, that's always a good day. They've never been anything but close. Bless their hearts. But they do have a good attitude.
Dan, take a breath, have a smoke. I think people are really going to be fascinated with what you're talking about today.
And Clint and Jeremy cleaned it up, for my mom, and
you did okay. You did fine. We're still on. This is going to be part of it. We're not off yet. I want to thank you for pushing me to follow up on this, because a lot of people who follow me on social media are interested in this issue. And at the end of the day, if inevitably people are going to start in the comments where we post this, he's not being straightforward. He's compromised. One thing about Dan that nobody can deny, and I'm going to say something different from what you think I'm going to say. I think I'm going to say you're a great guy and you're a straight shooter. It's not what I'm going to say. What I'm going to say is, by taking on these defendants, you have made a gigantic statement, and you've burned quite a few relationships, or those relationships have decided that you've burned them by virtue of your taking on these cases. Isn't that true?
I'm here. I'm involved in this primarily as a lawyer who has a lot of experience in federal courts, both civil and criminal. and some free speech background. But I am also, when I'm on the phone, I mean, I'll just be honest, when I'm on the phone with the lawyers for the Committee on Civil Rights or the staff of the House Committee, I am an ambassador for these people. And it's not hard to do it. So I think hopefully they're somewhat surprised at who I am. I don't tell them I'm an old lefty or anything like that, but they need to know this is a group problem solving thing and not just like a war of people who will not change their mind or listen to the other side. This is, this whole thing is, it's the place of definitions. It's what, who we are as Americans, and maybe we can like get together and kind of like, listen to, get rid of some of these really radical conspiracy theories on both sides and kind of figure out what really happened here and then why. Why? I mean, this is not, as you know, I'm very proud of the fact that my family's been here a very long time. They fought on both sides. They fought on both sides of the Revolutionary War. I found out about a year ago. Both sides of the Civil War. This is an important exercise for me, and I don't see why we can't kind of come to a meeting of the minds. Certainly, geographic ignorance, as for lack of a better words, of what people are like in other states, and the internet, ironically, have not helped us. I've talked about that before. Everybody has been reduced to cartoon characters. It's stereotypes, and that's not right. But yeah, I look at this as a way to help, but it's not like a total, it's not a totally a pro bono thing. And we do need, and you can talk about whether or not, you and Jeremy, about whether that's a good thing to talk about this, but we need, we know there's lots of support financially out there for these guys, but they're very, very difficult in managing it and keeping the money once you get it. And we haven't figured that out yet. These guys are pretty good fundraisers, but there was a rash of articles recently and one yesterday about all these fundraisers. Well, the fundraisers are, some are more legitimate than others, some are more effective, but really smart people with money who want to support a group like Proud Boys with the ideas that they have are probably not going to go out on a fundraiser and put their name and email out on there. They want to contribute different ways. So somebody has to, somebody smarter than me about these things has to figure out a way to get money to these people. There is money for these people so they can be defended. And that's a big problem in this. We have a access to courts argument is like coming into my mind. These guys, criminal lawyers, defense lawyers, some of them are public defenders, some of them are in the CJA program. I'm a retained one. Even if you drop your rate, it's expensive to do litigation, and there's no reason why we should be shutting down funds and caches of funds for people in America who need legal representation. And I'm kind of amazed that I think there are people on the quote liberal side who agree with that. We shouldn't be shutting down these sources of funds, particularly given the resources that the Justice Department has and has always had to bring these kinds of cases. This is a war where, to the extent it is a war, where the defense needs to have an even playing field by virtue of being able to have a war chest. The hours put into these cases are astronomical, and the work. And in fact,
somebody recently inquired with me about one of these cases and asked me what I thought the budget would be, and I gave her a very rough estimate. And I said, I'm always low, but you're talking this order of magnitude. And she was astonished. Why are you astonished? You're fighting the government. They have no budgetary considerations at all. That's the first thing you need to know when figuring out your budget, which is that it's your budget versus infinity budget.
Yeah, I'm not talking about me or my budget and how I'm, what I can.
I'm not talking about.
I'm talk about it and have charged general counsel, but this is even on a lower rate for a business-to-business case that would go on this long between lawyers who know what they're doing. this is somewhere between $500,000 to $1 million budget for every one of these defendants. I'm sorry, who's charged with conspiracy and obstruction. This is you want good people, will be attracted to it. Yes, I think there's a need for this, so that it figures into my rate, but you need hunting dogs for this, and they like money.
Dan, thanks a million for everything. We'll talk again soon.
Yeah, I hope that helped you.
Helped me. It did. This is a great episode. A great
yeah.
episode.
Well, try to make me look halfway sane, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, we'll talk again soon.